Hello everybody, my name is Alicia and I'm Eco Ambassador. Today we're going to be talking about food chains and food webs. Every living thing on Earth needs energy in order to survive and perform their daily tasks. For example, birds need energy to fly, fish need energy to swim, and bunnies need energy to hop. Almost every animal gets their nutrients and energy from the things that they consume. Think about the last thing that you ate, whether it be an apple, cereal, maybe a sandwich, some noodles. That is fueling you throughout the day and giving you the energy to complete your tasks, such as playing outside or studying for a test. Now, all organisms fall in at least one of three categories, which are producers, consumers, or decomposers. Producers are organisms such as plants. Plants use the sunlight, carbon dioxide from the air, and water to produce their own food through a process called photosynthesis. Consumers actually get their energy from eating other organisms, such as plants or animals. This deer, for example, called a primary consumer because it is consuming the plant. This coyote would actually be a secondary consumer because it is eating the deer for energy. Decomposers actually get their energy from feeding on dead plants and animals. This can be the leaves fallen from the tree or a dead animal carcass. Organisms that are decomposers are fungus and bacteria. Organisms such as a deer that only eat plants or herbs are called herbivores. Organisms that eat plants and meat are called omnivores. We are omnivores. I love broccoli, but I also love eating some chicken nuggets. Animals that eat only meat are called carnivores. Now, food chains are diagrams or pictures that show us how energy is transferred from one organism to another. Food chains and food webs also have arrows, and these arrows tell us how the energy is being transferred from one organism to another. So, the animal or plant that is on the end of the arrow is the animal that is being eaten. And the animal that is at the tip of the arrow is the animal that is eating or consuming that plant or animal. This way we can see how the energy is being transferred from one organism to another. So this is a food chain. Food chains show us how nutrients and energy is transferred from one thing to another. In this food chain, you can see it starts with the sun. This plant gets its energy from the sun and nutrients from the soil. The nutrients and energy from the plant is then passed on to the deer once the deer eats the plant. The nutrients and energy that was stored in the deer is then transferred to the coyote once the coyote eats the deer. Decomposers are very important to their environment. Because they eat dead plants and animals, they're actually called the cleanup crew of nature. This is really important because if we didn't have decomposers, then dead matter would just be piling up. They are also very, very helpful bringing nutrients back into the soil for plants. Remember back to our food web. So we do have our producer, our primary consumer, and our secondary consumer. Can you guess a place where we can add in the decomposer? So we remember back to saying that when it breaks down dead organisms such as plants or animals, that it returns nutrients back into the soil for our producers or our plants. So in this food chain, I would put the decomposers right after the secondary consumer and right before the producer. Because they break down the secondary consumer after it has died, and brings nutrients to our producer. Now, this is a fairly simple food chain, and there's usually a lot more interactions between our producers, our consumers, and our decomposers. The relationships in the environment can be very complex, and it can actually look something more like this. This is a food web. A food web is a collection of food chains. So when we have a lot of food chains that are together, it's called the food web. As you can see in this food web, it is a lot more complex than the food chain. The hawk is eating snakes, mice, and rats. We can also see that the snake is eating squirrels, mice, and rats. Can you tell what the lizard is eating? Can you tell what's eating the cactus? As we can see from that food web, there are a lot of interactions between the organisms in the environment, and everything is connected through the transfer of energy. As we mentioned previously, organisms use the energy they obtain to survive and perform their daily tasks, such as breathing, moving, growing, or in plants' cases, they use the energy from the sun to make their own food. Some of this energy is then made into heat energy that escapes from the organism. In this diagram, we can see that there is heat energy being released from the cow, from breathing, from sweating, and from just being in the warm sun. This heat energy, or radiation, then escapes to outer space from the Earth, and the cycle continues with new energy coming onto the Earth from the sun. If there was something that did not allow the energy to escape from the Earth, such as a blanket of greenhouse gases, as we can see here, then the Earth would start heating up from too much heat energy that is being trapped, and this causes climate change. Greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, are released by living organisms, but can also be produced by driving cars or big buildings that use fossil fuels. Now, I want you guys to think about what if we took one of these organisms out of the mix? What effect would it have on its environment? Well, I actually have an example for you. So, in the jungle, there is obviously a huge food web. There's jaguars, there's spider monkeys, there's toucans, and a whole bunch of other organisms. In this example, we're going to talk about the importance of spider monkeys. So spider monkeys actually eat fruit from trees, and they poop out the seeds. Their poop actually fertilizes the seeds, and the seeds grow into trees. Now these trees are habitats, and they provide food for a lot of other animals in the jungle. If we took out the spider monkeys, or there weren't a lot of them, this could not only affect the trees and their growth, but it can also affect the other plants and animals that are connected to the tree, such as toucans that also eat the fruit from the tree, or maybe even sloths that live in the trees. Today we learned about food chains and food webs. We also learned about producers, consumers, and decomposers. Now we also know that the more complex a food web is, the better it is because it's more stable. And we saw the complex interactions between plants and animals in their own environments. So now we're going to do an activity in your Eco Ambassador notebooks. I want you guys to think back to all of the interactions we talked about in this video and make a simple food chain. It can be with any plants, any animals, but don't forget your producers, which are your plants, consumers, which are things that eat the plants, or the animals that eat the plants, and the decomposers that decompose or break down dead matter and bring nutrients back into the soil. I'll go ahead and give you guys an example before you start. I'm going to show you my example of a simple food chain. So first, we can't forget our sun. And don't forget your arrows. So I am going to draw some grass. So the grass is getting the energy from the sun. I'm going to draw another arrow, and I'm going to draw a little bug. So the bug is eating the grass and getting its nutrients and energy from the grass. Next, I am going to draw a mouse. And the mouse eats the bug and gets its nutrients and energy. Next, I'm going to draw a snake. And after the snake passes away, I'm going to draw some mushrooms. And mushrooms are fungus, which are our decomposers. And our fungus gets its nutrients and energy from the dead carcass of the snake. So since food chains are showing us how nutrients and energy flow from one thing to another, I'm going to link it back to our grass, because after it decomposes the snake, the fungus actually brings nutrients back into the soil for our grass. And this is my simple food chain. Don't forget to start with the sun, and don't forget your producers, consumers, and decomposers. If you need some inspiration, think about the plants and animals that are around where you live. Today we learned a lot about how everything is connected in the environment and how organisms rely on one another to get their energy in order to perform their daily tasks. One thing I ask of you is to never stop learning and to go out and explore. Try to find the producers, consumers, and decomposers in your backyard. Thank you so much for joining me on this talk about food webs and food chains, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!